The free samples. It happened on a Saturday, the busiest day of the week at the warehouse grocery store. You know the kind. Aisles that stretch endlessly, bright fluorescent lights humming overhead, and rows of bulk goods stacked so high they seem to touch the ceiling. I was there to grab a few things and figured I'd make a quick trip of it. But there was nothing quick about what happened that day. The store was packed, as usual, and the smell of fresh-baked bread and roasted chicken filled the air. It was impossible to miss the free sample stations scattered throughout the store, offering everything from cheese cubes to tiny cups of soup. People swarmed around them like moths to a flame, eagerly grabbing toothpicks and tiny paper cups. I'd always found it a little amusing, the way free food brought out the greed in people. But today, something about it felt different. The first station I stopped at was offering slices of sausage. The sample lady was cheerful, almost too cheerful. Her smile stretched wide across her face as she handed out the bites on toothpicks. "Try one," she said, her voice unnervingly sweet. "They're our newest flavor. You'll love it." I took one, because why not? The moment it hit my tongue, something changed. The taste was incredible. Rich, savory, unlike anything I'd ever had before. It wasn't just good, it was perfect. I immediately reached for another, but the sample lady's hand shot out, stopping me. "You'll have to buy the full package," she said, still smiling. I glanced at the display beside her. The sausages were packaged in sleek black wrapping with no brand name, just the words "exclusive flavor," printed in bold white letters. The price tag made my jaw drop, $90.99 for a pack of 4. "Isn't that a little expensive?" I asked. Her smile didn't falter. "Quality is priceless." I hesitated, but decided to move on. The taste lingered in my mouth, though, tantalizing and irresistible. By the time I reached the next station, I found myself hoping the samples would be just as good. The next station was offering some kind of artisan crackers with a spread. The woman behind the table had the same unsettlingly wide smile. "You have to try these," she said, holding out a cracker topped with a creamy pale pink spread. Her tone was almost hypnotic. I took a bite, and the sensation was immediate. The cracker itself was crisp and buttery, but the spread was transcendent. It was tangy and rich, with a depth of flavor that made my mouth water. Without thinking, I reached for another. "You'll need to purchase it," the woman said, gesturing to the display. The jars of spread were unmarked, just like the sausages, and priced at $199.99 each. "What's in this?" I asked, wiping my mouth with the back of my hand. Her smile widened. "Only the finest ingredients." By now, I was feeling a strange urgency. I needed more, not just of the crackers or the sausage, but whatever it was that made them taste so perfect. I walked past more stations, sampling soups, cheeses, even a tiny sliver of pie. Each one was better than the last, and each one carried the same exorbitant price tag, and I wasn't the only one affected. Shoppers were piling the products into their carts, their faces a mix of desperation and euphoria. One man grabbed an entire display of the sausage packs, while a woman clutched a dozen jars of the spread to her chest like they were gold. People were arguing, shoving, even fighting over the samples. By the time I reached the frozen food aisle, the craving had become unbearable. My cart was already filled with hundreds of dollars worth of the products, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. That's when I saw the source. At the far end of the aisle, behind a curtain marked "Employees Only," a door swung open. For a brief moment, I caught a glimpse of the back room. Inside, workers in white coats were hunched over a long table. One of them was carving something large and pale. Another was grinding meat into a tray. My stomach turned as I realized what I was looking at. It was human. The sausages, the spread, the soup. All of it. The finest ingredients weren't just a marketing slogan. I stumbled back, my heart racing. My hands shook as I abandoned my cart and made my way toward the exit. But the sample servers were there, blocking my path. Their smiles were gone now, replaced with blank, expressionless stares. "You've already tasted it," one of them said, her voice cold and flat. "You're part of it now." I pushed past them, ignoring their protests, and ran to my car. I didn't look back, didn't stop until I was home, shaking and nauseous. That night, the craving returned. No matter what I ate, nothing satisfied me. The memory of those samples haunted me, their perfect flavors tormenting me with every bite of normal food. A week later, I found a package on my doorstep. It was black and unmarked, but I knew what was inside. The smell hit me as soon as I opened it. Rich, savory, irresistible. My hands trembled as I lifted the first item, a jar of that pink spread. I told myself I wouldn't eat it. I told myself I'd throw it away. But as the days passed, the craving grew stronger, gnawing at the edges of my sanity. And now, as I sit here with an empty jar and a gnawing hunger that won't go away, I realize the truth. Once you've tasted it, you can't stop. And they know it. The Midnight Vendor. It started with a rumor. In the heart of the city, amidst the towering skyscrapers and bustling nightlife, there was a hot dog stand that only appeared after midnight. No one knew the vendor's name or where the stand came from, but those who had eaten there swore it served the best hot dogs they'd ever tasted. The catch? The stand didn't always appear in the same place, and once you found it, you could never unsee it. Mia first heard about the stand from her co-worker, Ben. He was the office skeptic, always joking about urban legends and spooky stories. But that night, as they stayed late finishing a project, Ben wasn't joking. His usual smirk was gone, replaced by a nervous edge. "I'm serious, Mia," he said. "I saw it last week, near the park. It was weird." "Weird how?" Mia asked, half listening as she packed up her things. "It didn't feel right," Ben said. "The guy running it, he didn't look normal. His smile was too wide, his eyes didn't blink. And the hot dog, it tasted amazing, but afterward I felt off." "Off?" Mia raised an eyebrow, amused. "Like food poisoning?" "No," Ben said, lowering his voice. "Like something was wrong with me. I've been having these thoughts, bad ones, and I can't stop thinking about that hot dog." Mia rolled her eyes. "You probably ate some bad street meat. Happens all the time." Ben didn't laugh. "Just don't go looking for it, okay? Promise me." Mia didn't promise. She didn't believe in ghost stories or cursed food. But as she walked home that night, the idea stuck in her head. A mysterious hot dog stand that only appeared after midnight. It was too ridiculous not to investigate. That Friday, curiosity got the better of her. After a late night out with friends, she decided to take a detour through the park. The streets were nearly empty, the city quieter than usual. As she wandered through the darkened paths, she started to feel silly. Of course, there was no mysterious hot dog stand. It was just a dumb story. And then she smelled it. A faint, savory aroma wafted through the air, carried on the night breeze. It was rich and smoky, with a hint of sweetness, like freshly grilled meat. Her stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since dinner, and the smell was irresistible. Following the scent, she turned a corner and saw it. There, beneath a flickering street lamp, was the stand. It looked ordinary enough, metal frame, umbrella, steaming trays. But there was something about it that felt off. The vendor was a tall man in a grease-stained apron, his face partially hidden beneath the shadow of the umbrella. He was smiling, a wide, unsettling grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Hungry?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. He gestured to the grill, where plump sausages sizzled over the flames. Freshly made. Best in the city. Mia hesitated. The stand hadn't been there a minute ago, and yet it looked like it had been set up for hours. But the smell was intoxicating. She stepped closer. "How much?" she asked. "First one's free," the man said, his grin widening. "On the house." Something about his smile made her skin crawl, but her hunger won out. "Okay," she said. The vendor handed her a hot dog, perfectly nestled in a soft toasted bun and drizzled with mustard and relish. The meat glistened under the street lamp, and the smell was mouth-watering. She took a bite. The flavor was incredible, unlike anything she'd ever tasted. Smoky, savory, with a richness that melted on her tongue. She ate the whole thing in minutes, barely stopping to breathe. "Good, isn't it?" the vendor said, watching her intently. "Yeah," Mia admitted, licking her fingers. "What's in it?" The man's grin widened, revealing teeth that seemed unnaturally sharp. "Family recipe." Mia suddenly felt dizzy. The world tilted slightly, the edges of her vision blurring. I think I should go." "Of course," the vendor said, tipping his hat. "But remember, once you've tasted it, you'll always come back." Mia stumbled away, her heart pounding. She told herself it was just the late hour, the strange encounter, the overly greasy food. But that night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't stop thinking about the hot dog. The taste lingered in her mouth, vivid and haunting. Over the next few days, her appetite vanished. Nothing she ate satisfied her. Not her favorite pizza, not the gourmet meals from her favorite restaurant. Everything tasted bland, hollow. She started losing weight, her clothes hanging loose on her frame, and then the dreams started. Every night, she dreamed of the vendor, his wide grin, his sharp teeth. In the dreams, he was always cooking, flipping sausages on the grill. But there was something wrong with the meat. It was too red, too raw. And the smell, it wasn't just savory. It was metallic, like blood. One night she woke up screaming, the taste of the hot dog still on her tongue. Desperate, Mia tried to track down the stand again. She wandered the city at night, searching every park, every street corner, but it was always gone. The hunger gnawed at her, consuming her thoughts. She couldn't focus, couldn't work. She started seeing the vendor's face in strangers, hearing his voice in her head. And then, one night, she found him. The stand was in an alley this time, tucked between two crumbling buildings. The vendor's grin widened as she approached, his sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. "I told you you'd come back," he said. Mia wanted to run, but her legs carried her forward. She was starving, desperate. "What's in it?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "What are you feeding people?" The vendor laughed, a low, guttural sound. "You already know," he said. "But it doesn't matter, does it? You're hungry." Mia stared at the grill, at the glistening sausages, and her stomach twisted with both hunger and revulsion. She knew she should run, but she couldn't. The vendor handed her another hot dog, and this time, she noticed the faint stains on his apron. The dark, rusty smears that looked too much like blood. She took the hot dog, her hands trembling, and took a bite. As the flavor exploded in her mouth, she understood. She knew where the meat came from, and she knew why she could never stop. The candy shop. There was a little candy shop on the corner of a quiet street in my hometown. It had been there for as long as I could remember, its cheerful red and white awning standing out against the muted tones of the surrounding buildings. Inside, the walls were lined with jars of brightly colored candies, from glossy gumdrops to shiny foil-wrapped chocolates. The place smelled sweet, almost cloyingly so, and there was always soft music playing. the kind that felt like it belonged in a distant childhood memory. The owner, Mr. Grayson, was an elderly man with a round face and a perpetually warm smile. He wore suspenders over his neatly pressed shirt and greeted every customer with a friendly wave. Kids loved him, parents trusted him, and no one could resist his candy. I hadn't been to the shop in years, not since I was a kid myself. But last month, a friend of mine, Julie, mentioned it in passing. "Have you been to Grayson's lately?" she asked. "I swear, his candy is better than it's ever been." Something about the way she said it struck me as odd. Julie's tone was off, like she was trying too hard to be casual. And there was a strange glint in her eyes, a kind of hunger that made me uneasy. But I brushed it off. Maybe she was just really into sweets. A week later, I found myself standing outside the candy shop. I hadn't planned on going. It was like my feet had brought me there without consulting my brain. The windows were decorated with colorful paper cutouts of lollipops and candies, and a handwritten sign on the door read, "Special treats inside." When I stepped inside, the scent hit me like a wave. It was sweeter than I remembered, almost suffocating. The shop was empty except for Mr. Grayson, who was arranging jars behind the counter. He looked up and smiled, his face lighting up like he'd just seen an old friend. "Welcome back," he said. "It's been years, hasn't it?" I nodded, feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. The shop looked exactly the same as it had when I was a kid. Not a single jar out of place, not a single scuff on the floor. It was unsettling. "What can I get for you?" he asked, gesturing to the shelves. "We've got some new flavors you might like." I picked a small bag of assorted candies, mostly out of politeness. As he rang me up, I noticed something strange. His hands were perfectly steady, his nails impeccably clean, his skin smooth and unblemished. For a man his age, it didn't make sense. And his smile, it never faltered, not even for a second. "Here you go," he said, handing me the bag. "Enjoy." I thanked him and left, but the feeling of unease stayed with me. That night, I opened the bag and popped a small red candy into my mouth. The flavor was indescribable. Sweet, yes, but with an undertone of something richer, deeper. It was unlike anything I'd ever tasted before, and I couldn't stop at one. By the time I realized what I was doing, the bag was empty. The next day, I went back. I didn't even try to resist. The craving was too strong. This time, I bought a larger bag, and Mr. Grayson's smile seemed wider, his eyes gleaming as he handed it to me. Over the next week, I became a regular at the shop. I wasn't the only one. More and more people were crowding into the small space, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes glassy. We all looked the same, tired, hungry, desperate. Mr. Grayson never said a word about it. He just smiled and handed us our bags of candy. One night I woke up drenched in sweat. My stomach churned, and my mouth felt dry and sticky. I stumbled to the bathroom and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. My skin was pale, almost translucent, and my eyes had sunken into dark hollows. My teeth. Something was wrong with my teeth. They felt loose, and when I touched one, it shifted under my finger. I gagged and turned away. The next day, I confronted Julie. "What's in that candy?" I demanded. She stared at me for a long moment, her expression blank. Then she smiled, but it wasn't her smile. It was too wide, too sharp. "It's just candy," she said. "But once you've tasted it, you can't stop." Her words sent a chill down my spine. I stopped going to the shop after that, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. The cravings didn't go away. They got worse. And then the dreams started. In the dreams, I was back in the shop. Mr. Grayson was there, standing behind the counter, his smile wider than ever. But this time, The jars on the shelves weren't filled with candy. They were filled with parts, fingers, teeth, eyes, and Mr. Grayson's voice echoed in my head. Quality is priceless. When I woke up, I found something on my nightstand, a single piece of candy, red and glistening. I didn't put it there. I don't know how it got there, but the craving was too strong, and I ate it. Now, I can't escape. Every night I find more candy waiting for me. Every morning, I'm weaker, my body wasting away. And Mr. Grayson's words keep ringing in my ears. Once you've tasted it, you're part of it.